Welcome to Fast Pace, the new growth, leadership and management podcast featuring Josh Phegan and Dean Mackie. We wanted to peel back the layers on what happens in the world of fast-paced real estate agencies, from new leadership models to the management challenges we all face each day. This is about a new era in the estate agency sector. Rapid changes to business models, service lines, remuneration and growth present the greatest opportunities that we've ever seen. Sit back, get inspired, grow your skills, and reimagine what's possible with Fast Pace. Every Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Josh Phegan Digital. A lot of people look at recruitment as being one of the great levers in business, but another great one is also what we're going to call retention. Dean, we're going to talk about everything in terms of the retention game, and it's a really important part for any business. You spend so much time in attracting great talent, but why let them walk out the door? Because obviously there's some sort of challenge or issue happening in that business at one point in time. Dean, when you think about retention, why do people stay inside of any business? And ultimately the opposite of that, why do they leave?
Yeah, there's lots of various factors, I guess, Josh. Look, I think our industry does have typically high turnover rates of people, particularly in the space of property management. And I think it's influenced because, we've got a commission-based income, which is quite tricky for a lot of people to manage, I guess. And there's market fluctuations. So again, it sort of impacts people's income. This industry puts a lot of pressure on people's work-life balance. It's quite tricky to manage and there's a lot of stress in this function. So, I think it's just the nature of the industry. There are long hours, there's irregular work schedules, all those sorts of things. And so, this is a really sort of competitive industry, right? So I think that, it requires quite a dynamic approach to how you deal with issues of not just recruitment, but equally retention. I just had two team members in the last week on the last weekend just passed that had just gotten 14 years with us, and another one had 20. We've got thankfully a long, deep bench of people who've been around for a while. But it doesn't mean that your business doesn't go through change, right? Like everyone goes through life cycles. And I think that, you're going to have people turn over naturally because they might have started with you in a junior type role and perhaps they've worked their way through. They're now a high performing person. They've been a high performing person for some time and they just really think that now's the time for them to do something else. It's going to happen. If you've got really high people coming in and out all the time, that's a concern. I sometimes see that happen a lot with high performing teams. I have a junior person come in and they bounce people in and out quite a lot. And then when I start looking behind the curtain and saying, well, why is that? It's typically because people are coming in and they're looking for career aspirations. They're looking for people who can teach them the right way, that can give them an opportunity and help them become more, really. I mean, people don't just turn up because they want to leave their brain at the door and come in and get told what to do. So, sure. I think what I've found is that if you can actually help find ways to uncover people doing their best, bring their best selves to work, and that they can get a sense that they're growing and they're improving all the time, then that goes a long way to actually having people want to stay, right? Because they can see that they're improving where they are. And sometimes that's challenging because sometimes you've got to actually give people some home truths around, hey, look, this is the reason why potentially, or we need to make some changes right now. And perhaps you don't see the reason for that and we've got to push our way through it. And that can create quite a rocky scenario if in fact people aren't aligned. And I got to tell you, there are times at which we're doing things in our business where I feel like we're out of alignment and sometimes we've got to hold the tension and sometimes we get it wrong and sometimes we get it right. But ultimately, if people understand and trust the process that we're actually heading into somewhere for a reason, you can normally work your way through that. So I think you've got to set up your business in a number of ways. Our industry drives a lot of income. So, the way you compensate needs to be quite dynamic. And there's a combination of way people go. Of course, there's base salaries and so on. And then there's commission structures that need to be motivating, but they need to be also sort of equal out to what the company's goals are too, because you can't be in a business that's not making any money. And then also, what are the other benefits that you bring to a team? What other support things do you? What training and coaching? What systems and tools? Do you have sort of flexible work arrangements? Do you have coaches inside your business? Like, what do you do, right? So there's sort of like an intangible layer of stuff that costs quite a bit of money, by the way, that needs to be sitting behind the business where you get the balance of all of those things right. Because if you don't, then you're going to struggle on either making money yourself or potentially not providing enough value to the agent or providing too much. So I look at it and I go, what can you do as a leader to engage people in vision and values as well, Josh? Because, if I look at some of my higher performing team members, if they understand the why, the what and the how's easy. So if we go back to what's the thing that you're really trying to achieve as a business? What is that vision and how do we operate? I think that helps a lot. It helps with hygiene in the business. It helps with how we treat each other. It helps with, we have a thing called guiding principles, for example, that if there's stuff that comes up around who owns what client and all those things, having all those sorts of things, a nice clean business that people go, yeah, okay, I can buy into that, and I'm happy to work within the ambit of that, if that makes sense. Because if everybody's working in a similar way, then you get alignment on behaviours, and I think that's a reason why people will want to come back and stay inside a business. Because if you've got people all operating differently or in competition with each other or not treating each other the right way, they can go a long way to actually losing some good people too.
There's a few things. This is separate, and I heard someone say this the other day. I thought it was interesting. In industry, if you're just coming to real estate from a different industry, if you can make it past the first 2 years, you'll stay in the industry for 10. If you can't make it past the first 2 years, you're completely out anyway, right? So it's kind of like it's a bit of an addiction, like real estate. Like once you get it, you're going to stay on it. And then inside of an organisation, why do you stay? And there was an interesting thing I saw in retention, because you got a best friend at work. And I know that sounds funny, but if Dean's my best friend and we high-five each other on the way in every morning and we're both making calls and Dean's making a listing and I got a sale, like that's a great place to be around. If I don't have a best friend at work, then that's actually a challenge. And one of the things that they're working with a lot of this remote work is that there's all of a sudden people are not building best friends at work that they used to. And ultimately it's a very different level of relationship. So bringing people back into workplace has been a big champion for therefore building skill sets, giving people exposure to how to do a transaction, how to make that happen. The retention piece is ultimately that someone actually feels that they're cared for, they're actually able to produce income, and that they're given all the tools that they need and plenty of opportunity. Is that enough to retain people, or do you think that people do look for the grass being greener at other sides because the organisation maybe misses a life event or a life stage that someone might be going through?
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. It just depends where somebody's at, as to what they're paying attention to at any particular moment, because, no organisation's perfect and no environment's perfect and all those things. And I often find that typically, an agent who's, picks up and goes somewhere else, they just take their own stuff with them, right? And then you'll see it recreate itself in that environment. So I always think if you're somewhere and you're 50-50, you're better off trying to work it through, I reckon, and I think that
it's like that property manager who wants to go across the road because they get an extra $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. It's like, but you've got all of these relationships with all of these landlords already,
which are hard to build, right?
So why not get them to buy 1 or 2 extra managements, and that is then going to help you to have a bit more revenue to manage, which can then be a better argument for being able to get paid more, right?
Well, that's just a conversation in making sure you've got the right incentives in place, right? So again, but that's important. Like incentives are important to people. These days I'm finding, the work-life balance thing's really important to people, and like being able to work from home, having tools that are flexible, allow people to do that. I think that's a really big thing, and it's obviously been even bigger since COVID. So, I think that, little things as well, like how do you recognise people? Like it's not just about the income, but do you have leaderboards? Do you sort of, you take the time to just wish people happy birthday? Do you, we give people a day off on their birthday, for example. Just there's little things, can people see career paths,
And so I love that about career path progression, right? Because to remember when you had the call centre and you're like, oh, Josh, it's like every 8 weeks they leave. And I was like, oh, Dean, this is really bad. You're like, no. They're being stolen by one of our agents to go into their team.
Yeah.
And it became like an incredible training ground. You could see people who had confidence on the phone, knew what to do with data. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, I'll take that one, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Which wasn't necessarily a bad thing for overall organisational growth.
Oh, Josh, we had an induction this morning and it was a perfect example. Like we've got a tenancy concierge at the moment where we have, our tenant inquiry come through to, which is amazing. And it was somebody in there saying, hey, look, you know what, I've come from this other industry. I really want to learn from the ground up. This is a great opportunity for me coming in. I love providing service. So she started on our tenancy concierge, but has aspirations to want to work her way through the organisation. It's like, it's perfect, So if you can give people stay for different reasons. Like what is their motivation? So, Di Jones, we have a philosophy of saying we start with you. And that's for our vendor and our landlord and whatever, but it's also for our people. Like understand what people's goals are. Take the time to help them with that. And some of it's careers, some of it's work, some of it might be work-life balance. Some of it, I want to make a whole heap of coin for whatever their goal is. Whatever it is, being clear on that and then helping people through that process it gives people a high sense of satisfaction and creates loyalty, I think, because they actually know that you're there and you care enough because you're helping them, progress through their career. And then you go, what else can you do? What are some little incentives that you can sometimes put on and some fun programs? And sort of, it's not just about, hey, we're not here to just listen, sell real estate and manage properties. There's a lot more that goes on, I guess, to creating an environment that people want to be part of.
Yeah, this is a great conversation about, like, you know, people sometimes want the perception of progress, but even more than that, they actually want the feeling of progress. But what's the work I've got to do to get there? So
that's where the disconnect is often.
Yeah.
You know, it's like everyone's like, yeah, well, who wants to get there? And you're like, yeah, but here's the change that needs to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And that's when you get people take a big step backwards. And, you know, that's the hard act. If you're actually, you know, a business that wants to be innovative and you're looking to progress and you're looking to keep it moving in the right direction, it's a fine balancing act, because typically when you're making change in your own business, it's very difficult to keep everybody engaged and moving along at the same pace.
And so when I look at the leadership thing, I say sometimes people are going through life stages, you know, getting together, having kids, all that stuff.
Spot on, yeah.
Sometimes people are going through a life event. They're not always highly positive, but something's happened and it was unexpected. And now, how do I deal with that and the aftermath of that? Then you've also then got business cycles, businesses starting up, businesses progressing, businesses being very successful. And then you've also then got market cycles. And all of those things are happening at exactly the same point in time.
I agree.
So your skill and ability is to be able to read the play on where people are at, help them to get them into a better place, you know, which is what you've done a lot of. I think the Yellow Brick Road analogy was a great one. How do you give more heart? How do you give more brains? And really, how do you give more courage, you know, so that people can go and perform at their best?